r/AskReddit. What is the scariest/creepiest thing that has happened to you when you were home alone? I was home alone one night in middle school. I was in my room, which is right above our kitchen, watching TV. I had already shut all of the lights off downstairs cause I was eventually going to fall asleep and didn't want to get yelled at for leaving the lights on. So I'm laying in my bed. The family dog, a Chesapeake Bay Retriever, was lying next to me when I hear cabinet doors open and shut. It wasn't like they all opened at once and then shut, but more like one after another for a few seconds. I freeze and look at the dog, who at this point was an old lady, who perked up and looked at me. I peek out my window that overlooks our driveway and didn't see anything. Now I didn't think anyone was in the house because while the dog was lazy AF, she was a great guard dog and she would have responded if the door opened or whatever. So after a few seconds the dog gets up and starts moving towards the stairs, and I decide to follow, fully confident that if anyone was down there she would scare them. I grab my softball bat and my cell phone and follow her downstairs. As we come downstairs I notice the lights are on in the kitchen and I dial 911 because I know I shut the lights off prior to going upstairs. When we get in the kitchen all the cabinet doors were open, which was obviously not how I left it. That's when I notice that the door was still locked, so I thought whatever did this was still in the house. So I quickly ran upstairs to my parents' closet and called my parents and told them what's up. They came home and obviously didn't find anyone or any trace of anyone being in the house. We still do not know why the light was on and cabinet doors were open, but we had some other paranormal like occurrence happen around that time, so we chalked it up to the household ghost. I was home alone when I was like 9 or 10, whichever you are, in 5th grade. It was literally the second day my mother allowed me to just walk home from school rather than stay at daycare. Phone rings. Voice on the other end asks for David. I tell them sorry, wrong number. As a weird but relevant aside, we got constant wrong numbers when I was a kid because our home phone line was one digit off from H&R Block tax prep service, so I had developed a sort of standard cadence to wrong number calls. It almost always went, H&R Block. Sorry, wrong number. Oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. So I'm on the line, waiting for him to say oh, I'm sorry. Instead, he starts yelling that he needs to speak to David. He knows David is there. I tell him I have 2 Uncle Davids, but neither are there. The guy starts cursing and ranting in what, in hindsight, was pretty clearly driven by meth. So I'm already pretty spooked, having never really encountered a fully crazy person in my life. And then he starts describing my house. He starts telling me that it's white with brick pillars on the green porch, red doors, and with a white dog in the backyard. He concludes the call with I know you're lying, and I'm gonna come get your ass. In the next 30 seconds, I rush to get a knife in the kitchen, call my mom, and look frantically out the front of my house. Then there is a banging/kicking at the door. I screamed at a pitch I didn't realize I could, and I ran into the bathroom, only locking door, and stayed there until my mom got home. When I heard the garage door open and my mom call out for me, I started sobbing and ran out to her, knife in hand. When I got older, I found out from my mom that the Uncle David the guy was looking for was a pretty bad drug addict for years, and that's why I hardly ever saw him. He probably gave someone he owed money to a bad address/number. Thanks, Uncle David. My husband went out of town for his first work trip following the birth of our first child, so it was me, my infant daughter, and dog at home, and I'm counting it as alone considering I was the only one awake and verbal in the house at the time. I'd just put my daughter down for bed and was in the kitchen cleaning up when I suddenly heard our garage door open, something that should not be possible with my husband and second of 2 garage door openers, literally in another state. I raced to lock the door coming into the house from the garage and crouched next to it for at least 3 minutes, phone out and dialed to 911, trying to listen for any sounds of intrusion, before cracking the door open just enough to reach my arm through and close the garage again. I did not sleep super well that night, though some of that can be blamed on the nightmare. That was my baby's sleep schedule at the time, and had at least 3 more mysterious garage openings overnight in the following week. It turns out that when I'd paired a spare garage door opener the day prior, one of our neighbors was arriving home and just so happened to use their opener at the exact moment I pressed the link button in our garage. It took me an absurd amount of time to make the connection, because they honestly don't go in and out of their house very frequently. In any case, that first instance had me acting out parts of a home intrusion scene in a horror movie. I was home alone with my toddler, getting ready for bed after putting her down for the night, when I heard her call for me. So I went to her room, and she was fast asleep. Weird. Maybe she had woken up for a moment and then passed out again. Got to the end of the hall before I heard her call for me in a panic. Rushed back in, and she was still asleep in the same position. Sat with her for a few minutes and then made my way to bed when I heard my husband call my name. Must have come home from work early? So I go to him, but he's not there. Call him and confirm he's still at work, and decide I must have heard a neighbor or something. Crawl into bed and hear my husband call for me again, and then continue talking as if he's having a conversation with someone. Then hear my child calling me again and rush into her room. Still asleep. This goes on for a while until I decide I must really need some sleep and go back to bed with the lights on. Too freaked out to sleep, I was staring at a picture hanging on the wall when it disappeared. Like the wall just ate it? Look at another wall hanging, and the same thing happens. They would reappear when I looked away and then be eaten by the wall again when I looked directly at them. Decide I'm officially an insane person and call husband to come home. Fall asleep eventually and wake up and everything is normal, except my heart rate can't decide on a pace, swinging up and down between 30s 180s. Head into the hospital and I'm having a hypertensive crisis. Turns out it was the beta blockers I'd started recently. Nobody had heard of that reaction, so they kept me for a couple days until my numbers stabilized. No hallucinations after the first night other than hearing dogs bark randomly for a couple days. Not good times. Rented a cheap B-level duplex in a bad neighborhood for 3.5 years so that I could save up money to buy a house. First thing I did after unpacking from moving in was bolster security. I changed the deadbolt on the front door and installed a locking doorknob in place of the crusty non-locking one that was there. All the windows were old, shitty aluminum slider style windows with horrible locks, and the back door was a patio door going straight onto a deck. So I bought a hardwood 1x4 and 2x4 and cut pieces to put in the window and door tracks so that any potential intruder would have to break a window rather than simply opening one to gain entry. I'm convinced that a past tenant was a drug dealer. In the first 6 months I had 4 separate instances of tweakers knocking on the door looking for Sam. A couple of the tweakers forlornly stepped off when I told them that nobody named Sam lived there. 2 others got worked up, asked where Sam had gone and where he was living, to which I responded that I had rented the place and had no idea who Sam is. After being visited by the tweakers, I redoubled my efforts to ensure that all doors were locked at all times. I still forgot to lock the front door once in a while, and I had a very creepy experience one night after forgetting to lock it. I was in the middle of cooking dinner one dark evening and went to the washroom. After washing my hands and exiting the washroom, I came back to my kitchen to see a middle-aged Asian man dressed all in black coming up the stairs from the entrance into my kitchen. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, startling him. He said he was there to fix a toilet. I was sure I was going to die, but figured I ought to talk to the guy for a few seconds before lunging for a kitchen knife and fighting for my life. The guy explained that the landlord, Gary, had sent him to fix a toilet. I told him that Gary wasn't my landlord and my toilet was working fine. He asked what address he was at. I gave him my address and he started profusely apologizing, saying he had the wrong address. He backed down the stairs cautiously, put his boots on, and sheepishly left the duplex. I'm still not sure if he was looking for Sam to square up some unpaid drug debts and left when he realized that Sam wasn't there, if he was looking for a woman to prey on, found me instead, and reconsidered his insidious plan, or if he really was just some poor sap who walked into a stranger's house while on a mission to fix a toilet for Gary, but I never mistakenly left the door at that place unlocked again. I was 15. My mom was out for the night, and I was home studying. I had my headphones on, so I could listen to music while I was working. I guess it was around 9ish. My pencil rolled off the table, so I bent down to pick it up, and as I did, I looked toward the front door. The door knob was turning slowly, back and forth. Now, it's an old house and the door knob is old, but I know the way it unlocked from the outside, and with the key in, the knob only turns one way. I moved to the kitchen and called 911, almost eerily calm, and told them my name, address, that I was home alone, and someone was trying to come through my front door. Dispatch stayed on the line with me and said they were routing a helicopter to fly over. Did I have a dog? I did, and she told me to call the dog to the back door and then open the door and bring the dog in because they were going to use infrared on the backyard. I asked if that was safe. What if he was in the backyard? Her advice was to scream and she would notify the police en route that an assault was in progress. Yikes. So I called my poor little cocker spaniel to the door and pretty much threw him over my shoulder into the house before slamming and locking the door. Not much good it would do. That door had a single hung window in it. There was a large window next to it and a huge picture window in the living room. If someone wanted in, that deadbolt wasn't stopping much. Once I had the dog in, she told me she was going to hang up and call back in 5 minutes. In that 5 minutes, I was to call the place my mom was and get her to come home. I called. She was playing darts, so I told them to give the phone to her BF, and I told him what was going on. Apparently, he walked up to where my mom was playing, grabbed her and walked out of the bar. When the dispatcher called back, she gave me the names, descriptions, and badge numbers of the responding officers, and that she had informed them they were to hold their badges to the front window before the door would be unlocked for them. They showed up, showed me badges, and I opened the door. My mom was less than 5 minutes behind them, which considering SoCal traffic, means her BF broke a number of traffic laws to get there. That's when the police showed us the cigarette butts and footprints by the front window and the kitchen window, and the mud scraped off on the top of the gate that separated our front and backyards. Apparently, he had been watching me through the windows for quite a while before deciding to break in. I have a bunch of stories from this place, but this is the first one. In fall 2016 I moved into half of a really old house. It was built in the 1880s, a stone's throw from the original campus of Indiana University, which is now a park filled with homeless people and drug addicts. The owners basically turned it into a weird duplex. My friend had lived in it right before I moved in, and he claimed that it was haunted, but I didn't really believe him because he was a bit of an odd guy. Anyways, the layout of the house was weird. You walked in the door and were in a living room type space, and then you kept walking and there was a doorway to a bedroom, and past that was the kitchen. No doors, only door inside the apartment was to the bathroom and one that led to the shared basement. So, my first night there was uneventful. I was a little uncomfortable because I hadn't lived by myself in a long time and was just feeling lonely and on edge. I stayed up late and then eventually fell asleep, but I woke up again around 3 in the morning. Cliché, I know. What woke me up was what sounded like a group of drummers were drumming on every flat surface of the living room. It went on for a while, and I was completely terrified. It was just a cacophony of sound. After about 2 or 3 minutes I finally gathered up the balls to get up and check on it, and as soon as I passed the threshold to the living room it just stopped. Nothing happened the rest of the night, but I didn't get much sleep. Couple days later a friend was visiting, and he was about to leave. We were standing by the front door next to my bookshelf, and I told him about how I was having trouble sleeping, and the story from the first night. As I was saying this, a book threw itself off the bookshelf and onto the floor 3 feet away. It had to fly past the dresser the shelf was perched and landed between the two of us. He just gave me a creeped out look and said he had to go. I don't blame him. Eventually I asked the guy in the other half what was up, as he had lived there for 8 years. He told me that Noon stayed longer than a year and they all reported the same shit. For whatever reason, he said nothing ever happened on his side. Doesn't make sense, but there it is. Edit more stories I added below. Alright, so a lot of what happened was really small stuff. You would just hear stuff shuffling around in the room you weren't in. The light to the shared basement would randomly come on at night, even when the neighbor was traveling. Sometimes I would feel something get into my bed, like a cat, and nothing was there, even after I ended up with a pair of cats. I had a lot, and I mean a lot, of nightmares there. That was the bulk of it, but I have 2 stories that were more notable and here they are. So the first one isn't that long, but once again I was woken up sometime in the middle of the night to a loud crashing sound. So, in the living room there was an old electric organ with about 6 inches of clearance from the wall. I stashed a folding chair, like you would buy at IKEA, in between the organ and the wall. The crashing sound was the folding chair being unfolded and slammed into the middle of the room. By this point I already had the cats, and they were just sitting there staring at it when I came into the room. Second, I will admit, has a conventional explanation that I actually find much scarier than if it were paranormal. So, at some point I reconnected with an old friend who had moved home from California when his dad got cancer. He ended up living with me, which was not ideal, because as I said earlier, there were no doors, no privacy, but we became close friends. Being poor, we made it work. So, he ended up dating this girl who lived about 3 blocks down the road and would often leave and sleep over there. I got him a job where I worked 9 to 5, and we would alternate driving to work in the mornings. Anyways, one night he is over at the girl's house spending the night, and I went to bed. Sometime in the night, he came back home, and he went to the bathroom, which was in my room. Remember, no doors, so he had to walk past my bed to use the toilet. I wake up, Hez in there taking a piss, and I can see the light on under the door. When Hez done, and turns the light off, unusual, and lays down to sleep on the couch like usual. It was winter, and the cats had been escaping and coming back late at night, and one of them had been outside earlier, so I wondered if he had come in with my roommate, and if not, if he would have seen him come home and be waiting at the door. So, I decided to get up and check. I got to the door, open it, no Luke. I close the door, and he is sitting right there by my feet with his sister. Okay, I look at the couch, Rumi is already fast asleep as usual. All is good. I go back to sleep. I wake up in the morning and Rumi is gone. I go about my routine and step out to smoke a cigarette while my car warms up. As it gets closer to 9, I begin to debate leaving him to drive himself when I see him come sprinting down the sidewalk. We get in the car and start to work, and I ask him what time he left in the morning to go back 4 seconds at his girlfriend's place. He said he was there all night and I about shit my pants. So, I know for a fact the door was locked because the door had some ancient fucking lock design that locked automatically every time you used it. I also know for a fact that my cat was outside and in the morning he was back in the house. I don't know what to make of it, but it was really unsettling. And just for fun, a third story. I said earlier my house was not far from a park that junkies and the homeless frequented. In summer 2017 it was late, and I heard a bunch of noise on my porch, so I went to investigate. There were 2 dudes huddled right by my steps with a flashlight, and I asked them what the fuck they were doing. They replied using English words, but not something I would describe as language. Then they started walking towards that park, through my yard, and the whole time one of them was just calling back to me, "Hey, it's the dark, sorry." Don't know if this exactly fits, because I wasn't technically home alone, but I was the only one awake and the closest people were fast asleep 2 stories above me. But this happened recently, and I've been wanting to tell, so here goes. Sorry if it's a little long. It was about 3:40 am and I decided to roll up and smoke before going to bed after a long night of hanging out with friends. I live in a typical brownstone with an iron gate outside my small front yard. This is important for later because it makes a distinctive sound when it's opened and closed. And just like any brownstone, there is a separate basement entrance, sometimes to the first floor instead, below the front stairs with an even bigger iron gate that you go through before getting to the actual door. You can't see this entrance from the street because we have big planters obscuring the stairs and basement windows. That small space under the stairs leading to the basement is what I call the cut. So I'm in the cut doing my thing, enjoying the cold night air, browsing Reddit on my phone, the usual. It's my favorite time to smoke because nobody is out at that hour, especially in the winter. It's just really peaceful and I don't have to worry about stinking up the place. I had been out there for a few minutes when I began to hear faint rumbling sound off in the distance. It was short-lived though, and it stopped. I thought nothing of it. Another minute goes by, and I hear the noise again, but this time it's a little louder. I'm able to hear it better than before. But again it stops, and I quickly dismiss it. I take another drag, and continue browsing on my phone. All is silent. But it happens again, and it's louder this time. It's the deep, hollow rumbling of a plastic trash can being dragged across the pavement. Someone is out there, and they are getting closer. At this point I've put my phone away, and my eyes are staring intently into the night with the small window of visibility that I'm granted from this vantage point. I take a really big hit and remind myself, I can't see the street. Someone on the street can't see me. As the sounds continue on and off and slowly creep in my direction, I try to rationalize what I'm hearing. Maybe there's a lone garbage man out there bringing people's beans to the curb if they haven't done it themselves. But then where was his truck? His crew? And didn't the garbage truck already pass? It didn't make sense. I know the iron gate is locked, but I test the handle just to be safe. It's locked. Nobody's getting in. The joint has been completely forgotten, slowly burning away in my hand. It doesn't take long before I hear my neighbors being dragged around loudly and abruptly. I'm doing my best to keep my cool, but I'm actually shitting myself. Whoever it is out there, whatever it is, I do not want to find out. Then it happens. The rusty clink and creak of my front gate alerts me to the fact that someone is entering my front yard. I'm determined to not let curiosity get me killed, so I throw the joint to the ground, fling open my basement door, and note the fuck inside slamming the door behind me. If the smell hasn't already given my presence away, this certainly did the job. I immediately lock the door and jump away. Being a French door made of windows, I didn't want to chance being seen through the gate, which is possible when you're by the basement stairs. As I'm crouched down, I hear heavy footsteps outside, but I don't hear my trash can being moved. In fact, I only hear the footsteps. I start shaking as I hear the footsteps going down the stairs, but there's nothing I can do except stay still and listen. After what felt like an eternity of silence, but was more like 30 seconds, I bolt upstairs to the first floor and make a beeline for the windows. If someone is out there looking to do harm and sees me and tries to approach the front door, we'd have a recording of the monitoring doorbell. That's what I tell myself anyway, to get the courage to look. But to my shock, nobody is there. Nobody is anywhere at all, and the noises have completely stopped. I stand there for a while, trying to process what just happened, but the adrenaline wears off, and I'm hit with a wave of exhaustion. And of course, after an experience like that, I need to smoke. So I do what anyone else would do, and go right back out to the cut, pick up the joint I tossed on the ground, and spark up again. Everything remained quiet for the rest of the night. What makes this so bizarre for me is that when I told my mom in the morning about everything, and gave her my lone trash man theory, she shut it down by saying they don't do that, and she had taken the garbage out that night. So if whoever was out there was only checking people's garbage cans, and mine wasn't in my front yard, why did they open the front gate and come in? And what especially sent chills down my spine was when that next day, when I went outside, I noticed something about the way my basement window blinds were closed. They're Venetian blinds, and were closed in a way that, if you were standing inside my front yard above the basement windows, you could see directly down through them. Whoever was standing outside my basement windows that night likely saw me after all, crouched down hiding from them. And I'll never know who or what they were. We had a large empty bedroom that my parents were always going on about turning into various things, a guest room, a game room, a gym, etc. but never did anything with. It used to be my room before they kicked me out into the closet-sized third bedroom in order to never do anything with my old room, but that's by the by. It was always a creepy room, but it was even creepier now that it was empty. Unfortunately, it was right next to my new room, and I had to walk past it every time I wanted to use the bathroom or go downstairs. It had a really nasty atmosphere to it, and my mother insisted on keeping the door open so that the air could flow freely around the house, or whatever. I'd try to avoid looking at it. I was home alone a lot when I was younger, and this time my parents were both away for around a week or so. Over the course of this time, that bedroom had been getting steadily creepier, and one evening I walked past it, and I couldn't help but look. I don't know why, I just looked, before I could think about it. It was really dark in that room, because for some reason the curtains were always closed, and for a moment I couldn't see anything. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I slowly made out a kind of mass in the top left corner of the room. It was huge, filling up the whole corner, and it looked like it was constantly moving. Imagine if someone got a pen and managed to scribble in the air, just a huge mess of black lines all tangled together. It looked like that, just hovering there. I stared at it for a moment, and then I felt the most unbelievable sense of dread, and I reached out and closed the door. I didn't open it again until before my parents got back. I didn't mention it to them because I didn't think they'd believe me. The bedroom was eventually turned into a guest room, and wouldn't you know it, everyone who slept in there had some kind of horrible experience they couldn't explain. Some people reported feeling uneasy or watched all night. Other people reported seeing an old man sitting on a chair in the corner of the room. There was no chair there. My mother, on several occasions when sleeping in there, so she didn't disturb my father getting up early for work, saw the old man in the chair, and also saw him standing inside the mirror banging his fists against the glass. I myself had to stay in there once, and woke up with red scratch marks down the length of my leg. Lived in a house with a bunch of family, cousins, aunt, grandparents, etc. Cousin had a hamster. Super Hamster was his name. Loved to run on his wheel in the dead of night. Eventually he got old and passed away. Fast forward a few years, and I'm a teen, playing video games in our computer room where Super Hamster's cage used to be. It's about 2 to 3 AM and I just finished a round of StarCraft Brood War, and I start hearing a bunch of squeaking, like a rusty wheel that needs oiled. So confused I quickly turn around trying to find that sound. Sound continues on, and gets louder as I approach spot where S.H's cage used to be. Freaks me out, but I'm skeptical thinking, oh, I've just been gaming hard. The sound of that wheel still going on, I leave the room and go into an adjacent room, part kitchen / part storage. Lo and behold, Super Hamster cage is still there. Grandparents home, and they were hoarders. As soon as I spot it, the squeaking sound of a wheel suddenly stops. Freaked me out, but I was too much of a nerd to stop playing Brood War, so I grabbed a Coke and just nervously looked over my shoulder until 6 AM while playing games. Same house, younger me 9 to 10. Everyone is asleep in the house. My grandpa and my dad have left for work. It's prob 2 AM and I've always had insomnia, so I'm tossing and turning unable to fall asleep. Suddenly, the sound of work boots, steel-toed ones, start bumping up and down the hallway outside of my door. Goes on for about 20 to 30 minutes before I work up the courage to open my door and peek outside. Nothing. I check the rooms. Stepmom is asleep. Grandma is asleep. Little sister is asleep. Nobody in the house but me. So I crawl back into bed and lay for about another hour. Suddenly same work boots that start going up and down the hallway eventually stop at where my doorway would have been. And then my door slightly nudges and the boot sounds stop. The thing that has terrified me the most. Younger me, 5 years old. Different house. I'm with my mom's family, all my stepbrothers and sisters and everything. The parents are playing dominoes and cards. I'm waiting on my dad to show up and pick me up to take me to his house for the summer, but he's running late. It's 9:30 p.m. and finally my mom tells me it's time to go to bed. All the other kids get to stay up, but I need to go to bed because my dad will be there in the morning to pick me up. So she carries me upstairs, alone, in the dark, and places me in her bed. I ask her to stay until I fall asleep because the room spooked me out, always did. She said she couldn't, the other parents were waiting downstairs. So she leaves and closes the door. It's pitch black. I can't see anything. So I sit there and begin to notice something, a shadow like forming, is scurrying around the edge of the bed. I instinctively pull the covers to my face and watch this thing move around, about the height of a small child. I'm stuck in this spot for what feels like eternity. Eventually muster up the courage and run to the door, fling it open, and ask to come downstairs. I hear go to bed, and then my mom puts me back in that room and closes the door again. This time, the shadowy figure appears to my left side of the bed and just watches me for an even longer period of time. The blankets begin to get heavy and heavier until it feels like they're being pulled off of me. So now my little arms are forcing this now very heavy blanket to stay on me to cover me up. The shadowy figure then scurries into the closest and evaporates through the door, and then the image that has stuck with me since that night. One of those glowworm babies starts to go off, but it doesn't sing the sweet lullaby, it just starts speaking, words mixed up, and in different places, and in different non-baby tones. I'm fully freaked the fuck out at this point, and with tears in my eyes I run out the door, take a sharp left, and almost fall down the stairs. I beg and plead with my mom to stay up, and she isn't having it. Again she puts me in that room, but this time with a thud, and tells me to go to bed. So I crawl into that bed, and I stare down that closet, and that fucking toy comes back on, but no voice, just the light. But this time its head has been cocked to a different angle and it's facing me, staring down from the top of the closet at me, and it doesn't go off. Finally, as I get tired enough to drift off, I hear some thuds. My mom is coming upstairs, and that fucking toy giggles randomly, then shuts off as my mom opened the door. I've got the chills typing this. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.